Well, they've done a number of things. Inside, they're just not a one-man machine as far as Cameron Jordan getting pressure. Sheldon Rankins, a young player, University of Louisville. They spent a high draft pick on him. He's emerging as one of the real threats in that interior defensive line, which you don't see. We see players that play the run well. So he's one of those few players that he plays the run well, and he's also got some pass rush moves. So they're getting some pressure on the quarterback. Their linebacking core has played, because they play a lot of nickel, so they're playing their fastest linebackers. They're getting great results from them because they got guys who can run, and their secondary has much improved. Their safeties have stabilized. They brought over Kurt Coleman, a veteran player from Ohio State, to help stabilize the middle part. Marshawn Lattimore, coming off an excellent year last year at the corner. He had a weak start to the season. He's come on. Dennis Allen, the defensive coordinator, said he's playing better football in the emergence or resurrection of Eli Apple. You've put him on that Saints team. The Saints love Buckeye players. He has 6 Buckeye teammates on that, several of them being in the secondary. Eli Apple has turned his whole career around, playing good football for them. He's re-energized, reinvigorated. They have confidence in playing. So it's amazing to see how they've come from week number 1 getting bombed by Fitzy Magic to where they are now, one of the most dangerous defenses.
The Eli Apple situation is a really interesting one. I know you thought he should have stayed another year at Ohio State, and the way the beginning of his career went with the Giants, it looked like he would have, even as a first-round pick, would have been better served in the year at Ohio State. But the talent was undeniable. It's not like when the Giants took him in the first round, people were like, what are you doing? Like, he was considered a first-round corner. He didn't seem to get along with his teammates with the Giants. He wasn't playing well. He got a fresh start in New Orleans. For New Orleans, very little risk trading a mid-round draft pick for a player of that ability when they were trying to go win a Super Bowl in one of the last years of Drew Brees' career. That's been a huge addition for them. But just overall, I can't remember a team whose offense-defense has flipped mid-season like this. Through the first 10 weeks of the season, this was a top 3 offense and a bottom 5 defense. You mentioned it. Over the last 5 weeks, they have been a top 5 defense and a bottom 5 offense. So what's so scary to the rest of the league is if those two sync up at some point. If they get back to the offense they were playing the first 10 games of the year, and by the way, when they get Teron Armstead back, their left tackle, that should help greatly. I know you think they need another receiver, and clearly Sean Payton agrees, bringing in Des Bryant, then bringing in Brandon Marshall. But even without that second receiver, when they had Teron Armstead, the offense was excellent. Now the defense playing with confidence. You mentioned points. Over the last 6 weeks, nobody in football has forced more turnovers than the Saints defense either. So they have the ability to play any style of game. I know they lost that Cowboys game, but the defense was great. We know they have the ability to go out and drop 45 on you like they did the Rams in that great game early in the year. And with one more win, everything goes through New Orleans. All of those things speak very well for their Super Bowl hopes.
I do think the Saints can win Super Bowl 53, but I don't think they're going to return to an explosive offense because they don't have the personnel. All right, Teddy Ginn's on injured reserve. When you sign Des Bryant, when you sign Brandon Marshall, you're looking for someone to be opposite of Michael Thomas. When teams clamp down on them, right now their offense is playing in a phone booth. Mark Ingram is not having the year he had last year after starting the season on that 4-game suspension, which I believe has taken a toll on Alvin Kamara, because those 4 games where he was running between the tackles, he's not as fresh coming down the stretch as he was last year. They have one receiver that is a weapon. That's Michael Thomas. So you're playing everything in a phone booth. I don't think they're going to get back to making explosive plays. So that was gone. I don't think they have the personnel nor the players to be able to do it.
Well, let me ask you real quick on that. So early in the year, when it was most the same personnel, because we know they're going to get their left tackle back, they were able to do it, you think, because teams weren't covering Michael Thomas the way they are now and Kamara was fresher than he is now?
Well, they also had Teddy Ginn was playing then, so they had the speed. They don't have speed in their lineup now. Michael Thomas is not. He's a possession wide receiver. He is a volume wide receiver. You have to throw the ball to him an awful lot to be able to get his productivity. So you're playing in a phone booth. You're fighting And they don't have the speed. They don't have the plays that Sean Payton because of the lack of faith in the guys outside.
All right, let's talk some Cowboys now. Coming off a shutout loss to the Colts, a loss that Ezekiel Elliott said the team actually needed in order for them to regain some focus. Well, the team's owner, slightly less optimistic. Jerry Jones' cup clearly half empty here. Here's what he had to say about the team's first shutout loss since 2003.
We are concerned. We should be concerned. Parity is really here in the NFL. There's a lot of competitive teams that have a chance here. And we've got to realize that any team can beat you. They pay their guys, too, when you play them. And they're paid to beat you. And you go out there and give them an opportunity and line it up for them, it can happen to you.
CC, Jerry seems very concerned about his Cowboys teams. Can't you look at this and say, well, it's just one game. They had played 5 great games where they seemingly put it all together, and then maybe they took a step back? Or is there a bigger concern than that?
Yeah, it's only one game, but when you start off 2-5, 2-4, when you start off like that in the NFL, your margin of error, it comes down to if you lose again, then yes, it is high alert. Yeah, that's doing business in the National Football League. If you get a slow start, or you can be like the Rams. The Rams have some house money, but now they've lost 2 in a row. Dallas doesn't want to be in that because there was no house money because they got off to that slow start. Jerry is right about a couple things. Well, the obvious, they pay their guys a lot of money too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And they're trying to be able to figure out how they can defend the Cowboys. And offensively, teams have that part figured out. I don't want these younger players to think that you can go through a lull and be able to ease your way back into the playoffs. So each week becomes very important. I think that Jerry also pointed out because the opposition this week is a team that they could have some type of letdown. Tampa Bay is very, very talented. They only got 5 wins. But as we saw in the 2 games with New Orleans this year, week number 1, they defeated New Orleans. And then 2 weeks ago, they gave New Orleans a battle that they could have won that game against the Saints. So Jerry's right on it. These are the types of sound bites I want to see coming from teams potentially in the playoffs, either from their leaders or from their head coaches. So I believe Jerry is on the pulse of his team this week.
He's right about another thing as well. When he says that's parity in the NFL. You know what parity in the NFL is? An 8-6 Cowboys team basically having the division locked up. Like, the reason the Cowboys are in the position they're in is because there are no dominant teams in the league. There are 4 teams right now with gaudy records in the Saints, the Rams, the Chiefs, and the Chargers. But I don't think there's any team right now you feel like, oh man, that team is a juggernaut. You mentioned the Rams struggling as of late, the Saints offense going MIA, the Chiefs defense never showing up this year. Like,
the only difference in this year and last year, we were talking about the same teams, but we forget the warts that they had. Last year coming into the playoffs, Minnesota, Case Keenum. You got faith in him? Philadelphia, they got a backup quarterback. What about the Saints defense? Oh, man, hey, the big plays New England's giving up. Oh, my goodness, they're not good enough. So the only difference is 2018 compared to 2017.
I mean, it is more typical than not that, and it's the way the NFL wants it, that there aren't a couple overwhelming juggernauts. There's not a Golden State Warriors of the NFL, and they don't want there to be. They want it to be, what was it, last week, going into week 15, 26 teams of the 32 were alive for the postseason. But that's the other key factor here. And the reason why the Cowboys have to look at what happened against Indianapolis with a level of concern, even though they didn't have to have that game. That the team they played in Indianapolis, that is the caliber of team at a minimum they will be playing in the postseason. And we're no longer judging the Cowboys against, can they beat Washington at home? Can they sweep Philly? We're saying, okay, the Saints, the Bears, the Rams, the Seahawks, the Vikings. Those are the other playoff teams in the league. The Vikings are the only ones that have been as inconsistent as the Cowboys. They fired an offensive coordinator because of it, but we know their level of talent. Like, the Cowboys on the season have outscored their opponent by 7 points. They have been an above-average team that has made some really big plays in big spots. But, of course, you should be concerned because now you're going to have to beat the best teams in football.
And if you break that down specifically, you're going to need to score points. And and you need to score points when you have the opportunity to. And this Cowboys team is not a very successful team in the red zone. And until they are able to turn those threes into sevens, I feel like they will have a hard time going up against those other NFC teams.
Yeah, they're going to have to do some different things in the red zone. They haven't been as good. And the ability to be able to get those extra 4 points, it helps out not only for momentum, but it really helps out the defense. It gives the defense more margin of error. So now the defense, when you're facing offenses, you can take more chances. Because, you know why? Because you've gotten those points on the board and you have the ability to have confidence. What will they change? How do I get Ezekiel Elliott the football in the red zone in a situation where he can be productive and either throw the ball either to Amari Cooper or the tight end? They just started to utilize the tight end in the field. Now I need to try to utilize them in the red zone. If I was doing something different, I would try to throw the ball to the tight end down the middle of the field. That's where defenders are afraid of. For one, you can't hit a guy high. So if the ball's coming high, you have to go low on him. So the ability to make a catch, a bang-bang play is always there. Dallas doesn't attack that because they don't utilize their tight end. And almost all their routes are in-breaking routes. As we saw in the Philadelphia game, they blitz Dak. Amari Cooper gets the deflection off the defender's shoulder. That was a lucky play. Philadelphia knew exactly where they were going to throw the ball. So now I'm going to put Amari Cooper with his unusual ability to be able to break away from defenders on out-breaking routes and give him the chance to be able to catch the ball and be able to get into the end zone. That's the way you change your attack in the red zone to be able to get these numbers leaning in Dallas's favor a little bit.
And one of the reasons they haven't been running a lot of those, especially deep out-breaking routes, is because of questions about Dak Prescott's ability to deliver that ball, yes, a strong ball in that spot.
It's a very dangerous throw.
It's probably the hardest throw to make in the NFL, right?
Yeah, and when we're trying to determine in college, hey, can this guy play in the league?
You see if he can make that throw.
Oh, we make him throw some deep out.
There's two stats that the Cowboys are second to last in the NFL in, and they are directly correlated. One is red zone percentage, what you mentioned. The other is sacks given up. And the Cowboys are giving up an outlier number of sacks within the red zone. Last year in the NFL, if you gave up a sack in the red zone, you scored a touchdown less than 10% of the time. So a lot of what's happening in these drives is what Steve's talking about. Yep. And then also, you have first and goal from the 8, and it turns into second and goal from the 16, and you're screwed. So they've got to keep Dak upright in the red zone first and foremost in order to be able to implement what Chris is talking about.
All right, we got to break. One more segment coming up. You're starting to worry about the Lakers after their tough stretch on the road. That is next on First Things First.
Jenny.